Now I'm going to illustrate what I have found to be the most effective workflow for working with Google's Nik collection of image enhancing filters. This will be the last time I refer to these sophisticated imaging plugins as Google's Nik collection, but I feel it is important to acknowledge that by Google having acquired this company in the autumn of 2012, then releasing the entire collection for a mere $149 in March of 2013, Google has, in one stroke, democratized the capability of affecting images quickly and intuitively with really smart and powerful plugins. In the past, this $149 price was only available to academia alone. What I'm going to show you here is a workflow I have found works best for me. One where I'm able to rework pixel edits on a photograph by way of the sophisticated plugins available to us today, well after an initial session with an image has been completed, the file closed out of and set aside. This is an important point here. One's ability to come back to a project and re-effect what was completed earlier in the day or once a long time ago. Nearly all of the world's most respected works of art have been either subtly or even dramatically changed by their authors over time, months in some cases, even years. Painters, sculptors, even artists engaged in complex drawings spend countless hours to complete their work. They often walk away to continue later, start up again over time, allowing the work to evolve in their mind's eye. Why shouldn't we take the same care with our camera-generated images? What is quite unique about a photograph as art is that the individual behind the lens consciously chooses the instant in which an event occurs. That moment, that experience along with their personal response to what it is that they see or have concocted on their own becomes their unique artful vision by having released the camera shutter. A deceivingly simple act with, in the past, a relatively straightforward method for bringing the image to life as a print for others to view. Now consider this. Very few photographers do nothing at all to change what was initially recorded on film or into the memory on a chip or card. Cropping, color correction, dodging and burning, details in order to complete the photograph for intended presentation to others are image enhancements, just like what we'll be doing here. But what we intend to do with sophisticated software like the Nik Collection, onOne software, or Topaz Labs plugins, just to name a few, can completely transform a photograph into something altogether new and unique, a standalone derivation of the original camera capture. I often see how I can make something I thought was finished or become frustrated with while working on it for hours become a better, more compelling narrative days or even weeks later. So when we choose to work on something we consider our art, then it is important to afford ourselves the opportunity to continue the creative process over time. I'm able to do this with my photo illustrations intended for exhibition with this process. I have chosen Lightroom as my raw file editor and digital asset management software. Here I conduct my initial image fixes, color balance, exposure, and dynamic range tweaks, cropping if needed. Then I export a copy of the original master file with my Lightroom settings applied from within the application, passing it along to Photoshop for my work with the Nik collection of plugins. I do not export directly into the intended plugin because I want the ability to come back and work on whatever Nik effects I assign to my image at a later date if I choose. Note here that if you export directly into one of the Nik plugins from Lightroom or Apple's Aperture or the Adobe Bridge, you'll be working on a copy of your original that will ultimately be saved as a flattened TIFF. The image enhancements you assign within the plugin you are using will transform your image when you close out of the plugin's workspace, and you'll be unable to break in to make additional changes. However, by simply exporting directly into Photoshop, your image copy opens as you see here. This will provide you a method of returning to your image later to continue work or make whatever changes and additions you want to at that time. I suggest that you do not export your file as a smart object, as this more than doubles the physical file size you'll be working on in Photoshop. First, drag the background layer on top of the Create New Layer icon in the Well of the Layers panel. You can more easily accomplish this by learning the keyboard shortcut Command-J on a Mac, Control-J on a PC. Then drop down the options list accessible at the top right corner of the Layers panel to select Convert to Smart Object. Now when we select a plugin for creating a series of effects, we will be working with that Nik plugin as a smart filter. Smart filters can be reopened, and amended innumerable times even after the filter has been applied to the layer it affected, our new Smart object. An additional benefit is that our original Lightroom edit is left untouched as our background layer. This will become more obviously important just a little later. Next, I drop down from the Filter menu to Nik Collection, and in this case I will start out with the Color Effects Pro plugin. Inside the workspace the plugin generates for us to work in, you will find a well-designed, sensible layout much like what I admire in Lightroom. To the left of the stage our image resides in, you will find the filter list, a bunch of recipes the Nik development team has provided and those you save for utility again in the future, and then access to a history record of your experimentation while the plugin is currently open. Note that the record of your work conducted while the plugin is active disappears immediately after you close out and move back into Photoshop. On the right side of the workspace is a column which serves as a sort of reservoir for the accumulation of filters we add one to another, each affecting the image as a group and in a manner that will change as you stack them in whatever order you eventually decide upon. Most times, one will only be concerned with how each preceding filter added to a stack affects the image as they build in chronological order. But I'll have more about how one filter affects the others in a stack sometime in the future. Each plugin remembers the recipe or series of filters you employed from the most recent session you were involved in. For my example here, I do not want to start my new session with this series of settings. So I will simply close each currently open filter panel by clicking on the little X at each top right panel corner. I'll begin by expanding the filter list in the left column. There's a lot to choose from here, and I normally have a number of go-to effects I initially consider, then dial back and stack to create a look that doesn't overpower the image. And what better time than this to make a point that I'll beat to death over time? The fact that we all need to learn the importance of subtly enhancing images. These are incredibly powerful filter recipes that the Nik developers have provided us to work with. We need to find the discipline to learn by adding just a little. We are more likely to make a more lasting and favorable impact when others view our work. One of my favorite starting points for the evolution of my photo illustrations is with the bleach bypass filter. Most of the presets in this filter drawer are a bit too heavy-handed for my liking this go-round, so I choose the one that appeared to me by way of its active thumbnail, least likely to overcook the image I'm working on here. Then I set to work pulling back on some of the scales to achieve a look I felt most comfortable with. Often I come up with a result I like by utilizing one filter alone, but you never know. If you're working with a photograph you like enough to invest the time in, I can guarantee you will not feel like you're squandering time experimenting with all you have to pull from. Just remember that in the process of building one filter effect atop another, you must continue to click the Add Filter button below your current active filter panel in order to add to whatever you currently see affecting your image. Otherwise, you will erase what you've done already with the effects you built earlier. But if you forget, don't panic. The folks who designed these plugins know we all can occasionally be space cadets. This is just one instance where the history record of our work within the Nik workspace comes in handy. Simply expand the History panel and choose the prior history state to opening a new standalone filter, or you can use one of the handiest keyboard shortcuts the bright boys and girls who author software have come up with. Command-Z on a Mac or Control-Z on a PC, and your previous series of settings will magically reappear. When I finish with all I intend to do, given all that I am provided within this plugin, I hit the OK button to commit those settings to this layer in Photoshop. So here I am with my Smart object layer above the original background. I'm liking what I see as the filter treatment, but start to wonder, I also like the image as it was back in Lightroom with all the tweaks I made there. What if I reduce the opacity of my new enhanced version of the image? I float my cursor over the term opacity adjacent to its active percentage window in the Layers panel, and scrubby sliders appear allowing me to click and drag to the left, then slowly, quite easily reduce my Nik filter affected layer's opacity. Alternatively, I could click on the value 100% in the window, and then using the up and down arrows on my keyboard slowly reduce or increase the layer's opacity. The point here, once again, is to take the time to make your adjustments slowly, paying attention to what is happening on screen. Keep in mind that depending upon the power of your computer's processor and the amount of active available memory for Photoshop to draw from, the rendering of your image in this process will be more or less fluid. Just be patient and pay attention to the subtle changes going on before you. I'm so glad I have this additional image layer down below the enhanced version. I am now able to add more or less to an already satisfactory version of my original camera capture, the background layer we started with out of Lightroom. By experimenting with the enhanced layer's blending mode options, in tandem with its opacity once again, I'm able to engage in almost limitless creative possibilities with an image. Something else to consider, I could once again make a copy of the background layer, then drag it above the recently enhanced smart object I've been working on. By turning it into a smart object as well, then choosing a new Nik filter, let's say Silver Effects Pro Nik's black and white conversion plugin, I can create another variation of my original that can also be re-edited to my heart's content, affecting both layers below it, working with the new layer's opacity level and attendant blending modes. This is enough creative variables to make anyone's head spin. Before I bring this screencast to a close, just to assure you, watch as I click on my Smart Object Layer's filter title. Once again, Color Effects Pro opens and I can add to or change my recipe however I choose. And if I quit Photoshop, then reboot and reopen my file, it'll all work just as you see me do here. You can see a larger version of this image posted on my Google Plus page. Its URL is posted down below within the video's About field. Thanks for watching. Like and share this with others also interested in image editing processes. See you the next time.